Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ink and Bourbon. This is Patrick Leclerc, and today we're going to talk a little bit about freedom of expression, cancel culture, banning, and freedom of speech, and what that all means, and how that affects us as creative people, as artists, as writers. So, first of all, people tend to be careless with words in this situation. And I think it's important, especially as writers, that we understand that words mean something, and let's not hyperbolize. Let's actually mean what we say when we talk about this. So, generally, if you're complaining about being canceled, what do you mean, and what does that actually do to you? What does that do to your career, to your ability to express yourself, to make your art? So, ironically, a lot of the people who seem to complain the most about so-called cancel culture, we see a lot of this. And it's people that have a big enough platform to complain about being canceled. And if you have a platform, you really haven't been canceled. J.K. Rowling is not canceled. I would love to have the amount of publicity and platform that J.K. Rowling has. John Cleese is not canceled. Orson Scott Card was not canceled. If we look outside of writing and performing, we look at Kanye West is not canceled. Bill Cosby is not canceled. Woody Allen is not canceled. These are all people who continue to have a presence, have a platform, have a way that their art can be consumed and that they can make money from it. So they are not even a little bit canceled. And these are what I mostly hear, the kind of complaint from. We see it a lot from comedians. We see it a lot from writers, actors. And then this ties into people complaining about their freedom of speech and their First Amendment. So I talk about freedom of speech a little bit. Now, the usual disclaimer, I'm an American. I understand freedom of speech as outlined in the U.S. Constitution. I'm aware of the fact that that's not the whole world. I've been informed there are many people who do not live in the United States, and maybe dozens of people who don't live in the United States. And this won't apply specifically to them. But in general, laws about freedom of expression kind of track. And if they differ specifically in your area, I apologize, but I'm going to go with what I know. So your right to freedom of expression in the United States under the First Amendment of the Constitution allows you freedom of speech, freedom of expression. First of all, it's with some conditions. For instance, I can't yell fire in a crowded theater. I can't cause unsafe situation. I can't incite violence. I can't slander someone. I can't write something that is libelous of someone. So there are some rules, but unpopular speech is pretty much protected. And the reason for this is when the framers of the Constitution were coming up with the Bill of Rights and looking at it, they didn't want a nation where unpopular speech could result in you being arrested, jailed, fined, because those kind of laws had happened elsewhere and even in certain colonies within the United States prior to this. So that's what it's for. And what it protects you from, you have freedom to say what you want without legal consequences, with those exceptions. Meaning the government cannot throw you in jail for voicing an unpopular opinion. it does not protect you from the consequences of your speech, and doesn't force anyone to give you a platform. So let's look at if you're talking about being canceled or banned, at what level is this happening? So the freedom of speech, the First Amendment, prevents the government from taking reprisals on you for unpopular speech. And that's basically, like I said, with some fairly strict, limited exceptions, you can say whatever unpopular thing you want, and you're not going to go to jail for it. You're not going to be fined for it. And that's what, if you're talking about your freedom of speech, your First Amendment rights, that's what you mean. So if you're being jailed or fined for things you said, yes, your First Amendment rights have been violated. So the government can't restrict your speech too much. Now, if you're talking about a platform restricting your speech, YouTube, for example, YouTube, Facebook, your publisher, a record label, a TV station, a movie studio. If you have a speaking engagement at a university and they decide to deplatform you, they're not the government. They're allowed to choose what they want to distribute or not distribute. I can't sue, Penguin Publishing for not publishing my book and say that they're stifling my freedom of speech. And that sounds ridiculous, and we all realize it's ridiculous. But that applies to most. The same thing to YouTube, to Facebook, to a television show, to a newspaper. They're not required to give you a platform. If anybody does successfully sue and require someone to give them a platform, let me know who your lawyer was, because I will put a bunch of publishers on speed dial and we'll go down that route. But that's what you're asking them to do. You're asking them to publish something that they disagree with. And you shouldn't be able to force them to do that. So that's deplatforming. And that, they may be in certain cases subject to some contract law. If you were offered a 3-book deal, if you were offered a certain amount of publicity, there may be clauses in that you could sue civilly, and that, but that's not a restriction of your freedom of speech, really. It's a restriction of your access to a certain place, and that's the equivalent of if you can't come into my yard with a loudspeaker and say something I don't want you to say, because it's my yard. And you can't come over and borrow my loudspeaker and say something terrible in my house, in my yard. So that's sometimes what people mean when they're talking about being canceled. And you can't ask a platform, a company, a venue to give you free rein to say whatever you want, and whether they agree with it or not, because they are going to be associated with it. You come, you say stupid anti-Semitic stuff, and suddenly your agent doesn't want to represent you anymore. And that's understandable. We can't force somebody to aid and abet your terrible speech. So that's that. The third thing is, are you being canceled at the consumer level? Can I choose not to buy someone's books because of their views? I don't want to give my money to someone who espouses those views. Again, I haven't canceled you. You've got a venue. You've got a platform. I am in no way required to support you financially if I don't agree with you. And I don't think anybody can reasonably expect you to. And that's the argument that I think people are making without making it. That, oh, they've been canceled. They can't make a living. Well, you know what? It's not canceling someone if they have to suffer the consequences of their own terrible decisions. I shouldn't be expected to financially support you and buy your stuff if I don't like it. Again, if that ever goes through, and somebody wins that, I want the name of their lawyer, because I will force a lot of people to buy my books who didn't like them. And it's a ridiculous argument. So let's look at where this complaint kind of originates and where we see it. Let's name some names, like J.K. Rowling. One of the biggest selling authors kind of ever. Tremendously popular series, beloved by millions, film franchise, tons of merchandise, theme parks, all kinds of good stuff. She's doing okay because she stated some views that people don't agree with. A lot of people don't want to patronize her stuff anymore. And that doesn't mean she's been canceled. That means that people who've been hurt by things she said don't want to give her money. And that's not unreasonable. It's not. And it's not that she's not free to have her opinions. She is free to have her opinions. But if you say your opinions out loud, people are free to disagree with them and to react to them and to think less of you. John Cleese. I love John Cleese. I grew up on Monty Python. Huge fan of Monty Python, Fawlty Towers, Fish Called Wanda. But he's tended to carp lately about cancel culture and wokeism and how you're not allowed to say anything anymore. John Cleese has a pretty big platform. He's been able to say anything he wants for a long time. And while there may be more reaction to some things now than there were, he's not canceled. Not even remotely canceled. And things may have changed, but things are going to change. And things that comedy especially, what is acceptable to say, what's not acceptable to say, what people find funny changes pretty quickly. Things that you can joke about, and then a little later they're not. People don't joke about them anymore. That's just society evolving. And you haven't been canceled. You just probably need to watch what you're saying now. And that's tough if you didn't ever have to watch what you're saying. I'm not a young man. And there were things that were commonly said when I was younger that are not okay to say anymore. And it's probably better that they're not okay to say anymore. But it changed, and I had to be aware of it. Everybody in my generation has to be aware of it. And if you're not aware of it, people are going to judge you. So that's kind of it. Can you be judged? Should your art be judged because of behavior not related to your art? Looking at somebody like Bill Cosby, looking at somebody like Woody Allen, popular, solid comedy that was put out, and now people have found out things about them definitively that were kind of rumored before, but now it's pretty definitive. And is it okay to consume that art? We get lots of people like Truman Capote, Roman Polanski. So they haven't been canceled. The stuff's still out there. People are upset that these artists are facing consequences for their actions. And that's just too bad. Your stuff's out there. So you're not canceled, you're still there. If the consequence of your horrible actions is that some people won't buy your stuff, you're getting off easy. So there's that. Now let's look at what actually is cancel culture. What actually is harmful canceling. It's books being banned, books being pulled out of schools, books being pulled out of libraries. And that's not a question of somebody not buying it. That's not a question of somebody not giving you a platform. That's using the law against ideas. And that's what the First Amendment was designed to prevent. And yes, I'm not going to get into a legal argument over the federal jurisdiction versus local or state jurisdiction. But if you object to something and don't buy it, that's not canceling. If you object to something and ban it, burn copies of it, have it pulled from the stacks of the school library, have it yanked from a curriculum, that's canceling. And I think we need, all of us, especially those of us in the creative field, need to understand what the difference is. And when you say, I've been canceled, in the immortal words of Inigo Montoya, I do not think that means what you think it means. Understand that there's a difference between people not buying your stuff because they think you're an asshole and people preventing other people from reading your stuff because they are scared of the points you're making. And one of these is just allowing the consumer freedom of choice. And one of these is really damaging to free thought and an open exchange of ideas and progress for society. All right, so before you complain about cancel culture, about wokeism, about how things have changed and you can't say anything anymore, can you say it? Is it that you can't say it, or is it that you can't say it without people calling you on it? All right, so just something to think about. Thanks very much. Please feel free to like this video. Hope to see you again next week. Maybe a little more lighthearted next week. And there we go. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.